Welcome to the Richmond Leadership Lab, featuring business and nonprofit leaders across Richmond, Virginia. Produced and hosted by FilmSpire and Ben X.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of Richmond Leadership Lab, Richmond's #1 podcast. Don't look it up. It's true. Did you know that?
I did.
Exactly.
I've been hearing that a lot.
Exactly. My name is Taylor Quinn. I am the CEO of FilmSpire. I am joined again with my co-host Christian Mosier, head of Ben X Consulting. And at the Richmond Leadership Lab, we get to interview Richmond leaders in both the for-profit and nonprofit world, really ask them about their experience, hear their story, understand how they've developed their leadership over time. And today we have an awesome guest, a very special guest for us. We've heard some people in the for-profit world, and today we're getting to hear from the nonprofit world, and we've got a real winner here. We have Vafa Akhavan, who's here with us. He is the CEO of World Pediatric, and Christian and I both have a mutual connection to World Pediatric, which is great. So FilmSpire is currently doing the podcasting services for World Pediatric. We've done some video stuff too during COVID, which was a wild time. Mm-hmm. And Christian handles all the benefits for World Pediatrics. So we are excited to have Vafa here today. Vafa is a true leader and a legend in his own. So Vafa, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us today.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I take it as a compliment.
No, it's true. It's true. I saw you got an award because you split time, I think, between Richmond and Canada. Is that correct? Or you have ties to Canada?
Mostly Richmond. But
mostly Richmond?
I came down from Canada.
Yeah, but you were named like one of top Canada's like business leaders, correct? You got an award for that?
One of the top 10 most influential Canadian professionals by
That's amazing.
Beyond Magazine, which is a global business magazine.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, Vafa, thank you again for being here. We'd love to learn your story and things like that. But for quickly, just really briefly, we'll get into World Pediatric in more detail. But for people who've never heard of World Pediatric, what's the 30,000-foot view, kind of the elevator pitch for World Pediatric?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's really an incredible organization. We work in two spaces primarily. One is pediatric surgery and one is neonatal care, infant mortality, essentially. There are about 450 million children under the age of 5 around the world that don't have access to surgical care. That results, the number of deaths from that are actually 5 times more than HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. So it's a big global problem. The World Health Organization recognized it as such in 2015. So that's one space that we work in. And then the other space is infant mortality. There are 2.3 million babies that pass away every year in the first 28 days of life.
Wow.
And that translates to about 175 million years of life that is lost every year, spread over 71 years. So it's a pretty significant global issue, infant mortality. So those are the two. So we have programs, we send teams, we do a lot of direct care, delivered care, we do capacity building, training of professionals, and we do transformational work where we'll work with hospitals and ministries of health to change policy, etc. So that's very exciting organization.
That's great. Vafa, would you tell us a little bit of just your backstory? You have a really interesting work experience of being in the for-profit world and executive and consulting and that kind of industry, and then you got into this non-profit world. So can you kind of just give us a backstory of kind of even like where you grew up a little bit, and then like how you kind of got into being kind of in the executive leadership world and for-profit and things like that? Give us your backstory if you don't mind for a little bit.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm Iranian by birth. I went to boarding school in England at a very young age, typically middle-class family that wanted their children to have better education and a better future, so they would send them off to England or France or the U.S. for studies. And then from there, we migrated to Canada, and I finished my high school and university in Canada and began my career. I think that it's that the lessons of early childhood actually have a significant impact, obviously, on who you are and who you grow up to be. And we were a family of faith. We were members of the Baha'i community. And like most nonprofits, I'll bring it back, most nonprofits are actually born out of a faith community, right? And influenced by faith, wanting to do good and wanting to serve others who don't have or can't have. And so that's the environment that I grew up in, and I learned a lot of leadership lessons actually from my father, and I only recognized those years later. Even some after my father had passed away, my parents learning leadership qualities about engagement and being of service to us. Servant leadership was something I grew up with. I didn't recognize it until I read a book about servant leadership. I was, oh, that's what my parents were,
Yeah.
Having traveled to many parts of the world personally, professionally, I've worked in about 15 different countries, 8 different industries. Half my career was consulting, half of it was executive operating roles. I've worked from, startup to conglomerate, small cap, mid cap, large cap, you name it. And it's really been a very satisfying, a very fruitful, and a tremendous learning experience, because you pick up a lot of things in different places, different contexts, and different environments, And I've worked at McGraw-Hill. I was CEO at the Forum Corporation in Boston. I ran the global consulting side of J.D. Power outside of the automotive sector. So, really great fun stuff,
That's amazing. So tying back then into the nonprofit world, how did you, what experience have you taken? Well, 2 questions. How did you get to World Pediatric? And then with all the experience you've brought in from kind of your experience in for-profit and things like that, how has that translated into being the executive director or the CEO of a nonprofit? How have those skills translated into a nonprofit environment?
Yeah, great question. First of all, about 6 years ago, I was, going through that inflection moment where you're trying, what I have a certain amount of runway left, and what do I do for that runway for the rest of my life? What do I want to do? And I decided that I wanted to migrate to for-profit. To nonprofit. For-profit was great, but nonprofit, is much more mission-oriented. And I wanted to focus on children because I really do believe that children are the future. They're 30% of the population, but they're 100% of the future. They grow up to be the future podcasters, the future lawyers, the future plumbers. Yeah. And if we can impact the lives of children, then when they grow up to be the future adults and decision makers, hopefully they'll be focused on how can we improve the world from where it was when we were children. So I joined the board of Children Believe, which is a Canadian nonprofit focused on child education around the world in underserved communities. And I was looking for an operating role, and the search firm, I knew the global head of philanthropy at that firm, and I had told him, as I had told a few others, that I was looking for something, and he reached out to me about this job. And I was fascinated by the trigger event of surgery. Right? I mean, imagine, if your spine is bent 100 degrees, 120 degrees, your future is pretty bleak, assuming you even remain alive. But then you do the surgery, and that surgery triggers a complete transformation of life for that child, and therefore the family and the community. The patterns over the past 10, 15 years, actually it started with the Gates Foundation in a big way. When Bill Gates started and his wife started the Gates Foundation, they brought over a lot of executives from their for-profit side into the nonprofit, because their intention was to bring that rigor, that discipline, that structure, impact, quantifying outcomes, etc., to the nonprofit world, and they were very successful at it. And that was a trend that they began. And most recently, we're seeing a growing number of boards that are looking for talent from the for-profit world to come in. Now, the basics are the same. You do strategy, you do operational design, you do organizational structure, you've got human resources, IT. I mean, the essence of it, the basics are the same. I think what's really different is the purpose. Right? Whereas when you're working in for-profit, they have lots of wonderful visions and mission statements and so on. At the end of the day, the underlying
is for-profit.
It's for-profit. That's why it's called for-profit, right? It's, earnings per share or, et cetera, et cetera. and that's fine. But when you look at our organization, World Pediatrics, we just did an organizational assessment. We had an outside agency come in and do a assessment.
Oh, wow.
We were ranked, I think it was about 14% higher than their benchmark, global benchmark, for-profit, non-profit, in terms of employee engagement. Like the mission and purpose of the organization is so strong and so prevalent within everyone. Their commitment and their passion. It doesn't matter how much options I got or grants I got when I was at McGraw-Hill. It wasn't the same as this experience here. I mean, it's really in your heart and soul, and that's a fundamental difference, right? On the other side, you're bringing a lot more structure and discipline,
right,
and rigor to how you conduct the affairs of the nonprofit organization.
That's great. I love that. Love the mission part. You probably got another question.
And how long you've been at World Pediatrics for
3.5 years?
3.5 years.
Yeah.
What was something, obviously making this transition, and you sat on a bunch of different boards throughout your career. What was something that surprised you transitioning from for-profit to nonprofit? I'm sure there's some things you expected, but was there anything that's like, oh, that's awesome? Maybe the passion was something that took you off guard, or was there anything that surprised you going from?
To have lived the life that I've lived, you don't get surprised by much. Yeah. It takes a lot to surprise me. I was very moved by the impact on me personally of the children that we're serving. I don't think I've ever been moved to the extent that I've been moved by the impact we have on the lives of children. I mean, intellectually, when you're coming in, okay, surgery and this and that.
Yeah.
But when you're actually there at a cultivation event in Guatemala City, and this mother and child come in, and the mother tells the child, "This is the gentleman that runs the organization that helped you," and then that child out of nowhere runs and smacks into you and hugs you and holds you, and you don't know what's going on until later. You can't beat that. I never had Terry McGraw come and hug me like that when I was. I mean, he shook my hand a few times, but
sure.
It wouldn't mean as much.
Yeah, that I think was, perhaps it was a surprise because it was much more than I had anticipated or expected. That impact it would have on me.
Interesting. What would you say? Being here for 3.5 years, you guys have accomplished a lot in the last few years. What are some of the, would you say, the key goals and objectives? Obviously, bringing some more structure, bringing some more, rigor and different things into the organization. What are some key objectives that you see in the next, 3-5 years?
Yeah, I mean, our goals are the outcomes. The 3 outcomes that we're trying to achieve is more children in less time with greater impact, right? And what we realized is, the world is changing so much, so quickly, that, having a rigid plan is not going to work because you need to be able to adjust and you need to be able to pivot. And that's an important part of leadership. I think particularly in the past 5 to 10 years, there's a lot of conversation around how do you lead organizations in today's world, and I talk about situational leadership. You've got servant leadership, you've got push leadership, pull leadership. There's a whole bunch of leadership models, and I'm a proponent of situational leadership because you need to know the situation you're in and how you need to lead in that particular situation, in that particular moment, in that particular context, because things are changing. Who knew that USAID was going to go away? Right? No, nobody anticipated it.
Yeah.
Really, right? So I think in that context, then you set your goals as we have as what are the outcomes? More children in less time, greater impact, and then what's the plan this year or over the next 3 years that we want to get there? We're focused on those outcomes. We're focused on the 3 modes of care: delivering care, empowering care, transforming care. We know what those mean. We know what those are designed to accomplish. But we're also totally able to pivot and move, right? And be somewhat opportunistic because things are changing so quickly. You want to be able to adjust and change and pivot. So, an opportunity comes up to work with a hospital, in the Caribbean to turn it into a center of excellence for pediatric care. You need to adjust. You need to commit resources. And, okay, who's going to do it and how much is that going to cost and so on and so forth when you didn't have that as part of your plans.
Right. It wasn't in the 5-year.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So our focus is really on it. Whatever we do, is it consistent with our outcomes? Is it consistent with our values? Right. And do we have the team and the funds to get us
to make it happen?
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it. Do you think situational leadership is more important now than ever?
No question for me. No question for me.
I remember we were talking offline a little bit before this and how, years ago, 30 years ago, the planning might have looked a little bit different.
Very different.
Than it does today.
Very different. I mean, you look at how the markets are responding to the whole tariff question, right, in the United States, right? And how the business community likes predictability, right? Yeah. That's especially the larger they are,
right?
The more they want to be predictable, right? Because they want to go to market on their earnings call and be able to say this is what we're going to achieve and either achieve it or, overachieve it. That's what they want, but that's not the world we live in. So you've got to be able as a leader to adjust to the situation.
What would you say to other leaders listening, whether it's a CEO or maybe they lead a division or whatever it might be here in Richmond? How can they, what are some takeaways they can take from situational leadership? Because as what we see a lot, I'm sure you see, is maybe there's a lot of new leaders listening in, or there's someone who's been successful and now they're the president of this or whatever it might be. What are some tips you would give leaders on how to be, or how to have better situational leadership?
Yeah. Well, I think in order to be a proficient situational leader, you need to build a career that encompasses different situations, right?
Yeah.
Like if you say, okay, I am going to go and work at whatever the company is. We're going to work at a company. I'm going to be there for 20 years, and that's going to be my career. And I'm going to move up the ladder and go into sales or market and end up being a senior executive or maybe even the CEO. Your situational experience is going to be very limited, right? If you look at, I'm not touting my own experience, but if you look at my experience, working in all of those different industries, all of those different situations, all of those different countries, unbeknown to me, I was developing the competencies and the capacities and the experiences for situational leadership. So I would say look for, have your career be intentional and purposeful in having different experiences as you go. I think that's an important part of the equation. And be very, you have to be very mindful of the situations you're in. Even if you're an entrepreneur and you have your own company, you face different situations. You need to reflect on your experience, right? You need to account every day, every week. Take time and reflect. What did I learn? What was the situation? What did I learn? What did I do well? What didn't I do well? What mistakes did I make? And take that into account every time. Okay, what change do I need to make next week? What change do I need to make next month, etc.
That's really good advice, because I feel like it's so easy for business owners or execs just to you're thrown a 1,000 things to do, and there's so much to do, but to stop and reflect. I know I have a hard time with that, because I'm like, I got to get to the next thing. I got to do the next thing. But, is there a way you found that's been helpful for you? How do you find ways to pause and reflect and take time to kind of do that?
Yeah, I usually, I suffer from the same.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not dude. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I mean, there are times when I don't know where the week went. Right. So we're all like that. And I think the important thing is to be comfortable with your own imperfections and to be vulnerable with yourself so that you can grow and learn. Because if you don't have that constant, I'm at my age, I still have a passion for learning. I still want to learn. I want to do something different, something new. But typically, I take the morning because in the evenings I'm too tired.
Yeah.
In the morning I'm fresh. I'm having my breakfast and I'm thinking about, because I get up pretty early before the family gets up, and kind of reflect on what's going on, what's happening, and take that time. It's good to also reflect in a team environment. If you've got a senior leadership team, or if you've got a small team in your shop of 4 or 5 people, it doesn't matter. Sit together and reflect and learn from each other. Make that a part of your routine once a week, once every 2 weeks, and talk about what happened. And you've got to give yourself license to do that, and you got to give the organization license.
We'll be right back after this short message.
Are employee benefits a headache for your company? At BenX, we simplify benefits so you can focus on growing your business. From custom benefit solutions to cutting-edge technology, we make it easy for companies to take care of their teams. Visit benxconsulting.com to see how we can simplify benefits for your growing company.
Your story is powerful, but is it reaching the right audience? At FilmSpire, we create compelling videos and provide marketing strategies to make sure they drive real results. From crafting your message to amplifying it, we help you connect with your audience like never before. Ready to inspire? Let's tell your story. And now, back to the show.
That's great. That's great. I wanted to ask you about boards in particular. You've served on a lot of boards, and
well, not a lot.
Well,
but
some, yeah,
couple.
some,
yeah. Okay.
But you deal with the board obviously as a
Sure.
nonprofit and things
Sure.
like that. I'm curious, how do you work to make boards and leadership align? I feel like sometimes they can kind of be in conflict, but how do you work to make sure boards and keeping everyone in line or happy or focused on mission? Plus, with you guys, I don't know if you've had experiences with other boards where there's been conflict or disagreements, but how do you work to make sure everyone plays along and we're all staying, moving forward on that mission you've talked about?
It's really, really important when you have a board of directors and a senior leadership team to ensure that there's alignment, to ensure there is coherence between them. I'll give you an example. We right now are beginning our strategic planning process. All right? So we have clarity in our organization that our board is a governance board. And so their primary responsibility is to approve the strategy and the budgets, etc., our plans. And then leadership's responsibility is to execute those strategies and plans, report back to the board, and the back and forth that happens as a result of that. In order to achieve that alignment and coherence between the two, the best way is to have them both engaged in the development process. So we're accompanying each other. It's a journey of accompaniment. So, for example, our leadership team will be meeting with our board in the next couple of months to begin the strategic planning process. And as you accompany each other as two sides of the same coin, what happens is the discussions will become more coherent and aligned, and what emerges at the other end is going to be something that both have had a role to play in developing, both have had a role in articulating, and both have a clear understanding of what's required to execute, monitor, manage, etc. And so then when you go apart and the board is meeting quarterly and the management team is meeting regularly and executing, when you come back together, there is that common foundation. So that level of collaboration is very important. The other part of the question is really the nature of the relationship between management and the board. And management, and particularly the chief executive, of course, has to work on developing that relationship with the board. So you have the officers of the board, obviously. You may have various committees of the board, and those committees will have chairs. So there's a host of relationships that you need to manage. All of that has to be based on the cornerstone of trust. And what drives the trust is transparency. So I, as the chief executive, need to be transparent with my board to the point of showing my vulnerabilities and actually engaging the board. And if you've got a great board like I do at World Pediatrics, an amazing board, very open, tremendous amount of trust and confidence mutually. And that's really important for the umbrella that guides the entire organization to achieve its future.
How important is it for a leader to be direct, especially like with their mission or with their employees?
Great question. I believe in transparency, but I believe in wise and tactful transparency. There's nothing absolute. You can't be absolutely transparent, right? Because there are certain things that you have to, it's like, I can't give a filet mignon to a 2-week-old baby. They just won't be able to digest it. First of all, probably not. I'm sure.
You can give it all day.
Yeah, unless you have it as baby food, right? So there's some things that you have to be tactful and you have to be wise about. It's not about you holding secrets. It's about you as a leader have to make that decision of how do I communicate this? How do I help my organization, my board, my senior leadership team move forward in this direction, right? What's the best way of communicating? How do I communicate? What's the content of that communication, my behavior, etc.? So I think that's an important part of the equation. So I do believe that as a leader, you need to be present, and you need to be visible. You need to be responsive, right? You want to be careful about accessibility,
sure,
right? And you're the one as the CEO or the senior executive that set those boundaries. And after a while, people will get it. What I can go to Vafa with and what I don't go to Vafa with. But as a leader, you want to. I've always believed that you need to be present, you need to be visible, you need to be accessible, and that has had great impact on the organization.
I want to ask a couple quick questions to piggyback on the CEO and the failures and challenges, because I'm sure it's not just like this for a year or for 2 years. It's like whoop, 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 up, up and down. Let's start with the challenge, and then we'll go to success. So what it doesn't have to be the biggest one, but what is a big challenge that you faced as a CEO, and what are the key learnings from that challenge?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I think there's a number of challenges, obviously, that are faced by any CEO. I think there's 3 that have always stood out for me. First and foremost, I would say unity. That's a primary role of the chief executive, is to create unity within the organization towards a common purpose. If you don't have unity, you're not really going to accomplish anything. Imagine you're, the Philadelphia Eagles or the Kansas City Chiefs, and you're trying to accomplish the greatest accomplishment, which is to win the Super Bowl, but people are doing their own thing. The quarterback, the coach, the general manager is trying to create a sense of unity within the team so that they can accomplish great things. That's very important, I'd say, foremost for a chief executive. The second is the actual team. Is who do you have on the team, what positions they have. That's the primary one of the primary responsibilities of a chief executive, is to make sure that you have the right team in place to accomplish the goal. Then unity becomes part of that environment that you're trying to create so that the team can actually achieve excellence. And the third, I'd say, in my context, having worked a lot in the change environment, is one of resistance as a challenge for a chief executive. Is when you go into a change environment, then you need to change, you need to pivot. Obviously, if it's a significant change, then there'll be a lot of resistance typically in an organization. You'll have 3 clusters. One cluster is they jump on board and they're with you and they want to move forward towards the new vision with the new strategy. There's a block in the middle that are kind of wait and see on the fence, see how it goes. And then there's that third category that are really resistant to the organization. So that resistance and how it expresses itself is very significant for a chief executive to overcome. What you learn from all of that as you go through it is not just the importance of those three elements, which is unity, the team, and how to overcome resistance, but also the how-to. As you experience more of it, as you pay more attention of it, you're learning how to achieve unity. You're learning how to identify a great team and have them work well together. And you're learning how to overcome resistance.
Now, Vafa, what about like something you guys are just really proud of, like a great accomplishment at your time at World Pediatrics specifically, or anything like that? You guys have made such a big impact.
Yeah.
For how many years you guys have been as an organization, and then plus your time there now. But something you're really proud of, accomplishment-wise.
I'm most proud of the team that we have in the organization. We're probably one of the most efficient nonprofits in the health sector doing what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not delivering 5,000 vaccines a day, right? Which is a different scale model, right? We're doing very complicated work. Yeah. And we're very efficient. So that I'm most proud of the team and their commitment to the purpose and figuring things out and how we can improve things. The outcome of that is that we have surpassed the peak of the organization in its history.
Wow.
Right? We have, we served 3,200 children. Last year, we served 3,200 children in 27 countries. We did more than 1,100 surgeries. We sent 97 surgical teams into country to do work. We trained, I think it was about 2,300, close to 2,300 or more than 2,300 health professionals, about 4,000 hours of training. Our revenue is greater than it has ever been in the organization. And so, but that's all because of the team, right? The most common denominator in all things is the human being. Right. Even the AI is written by a human being.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So it's the common denominator.
Yeah.
You get that right, the rest will flow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, the strategy didn't work. Well, who designed the strategy? Right? Operationally, we're not very good, but who's responsible for the operations? Right? You get the right team together, which is the principle. I learned that from a good friend of mine who was the CEO of, he retired 3 years ago, the CEO of Honeywell in Eurasia.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that the principal responsibility of a CEO is to get the right team together.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I've tried to practice that ever since, is if I can get the right team, do right by the team as the CEO, that's my job, the team will take care of it.
Man, those are some great points.
I know.
You might have asked a couple fun questions?
Yeah, by all means.
So if you weren't running World Pediatrics, what would you be doing?
I would be doing something similar.
Mm-hmm.
I would be doing something to give back, to serve others. I've always had a weakness for the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I don't have like favorite hockey teams or football teams, or I have a favorite rugby team, but is I love good games and I always root for the underdog.
That's great.
So I want to serve. I would be serving. I'd be in another nonprofit doing something different.
Yeah.
Until I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vafa, can I ask you about, you've traveled a lot, you've lived in different places.
Yeah.
What's your take on Richmond? What do you like about Richmond? Why has it been great for World Pediatric? I know you guys are moving downtown. You guys have made that move already, which is great.
New office.
That's
you guys
exciting.
should come by. Yeah, you should come by. Look at it. It's fantastic. We were just in the Richmond Biz, where they covered us and pictures and so on. So
that's great. Yeah. So what do you love about Richmond, and kind of what's your take on Richmond in the nonprofit world here in Richmond as well? Love your kind of take on Richmond.
Sure. So my friends, after I came down, my friends would ask, what's Richmond like? How would you describe Richmond? I was trying to figure out, how do I describe Richmond? And I describe Richmond as a small Boston in the South.
Mm.
Cool.
It's got that it's got that rich history, the culture, the ambiance, the architecture. It's very rich, as is Boston, as one of the original, towns, cities in the country, right? A smaller version of it, but then it's also in the South, so you got that kind of that layer of Southern charm that's there, which is wonderful, right? So you've got that balance, between a large environment, but at the same time, it's got that kind of pace of the South.
Yep.
I lived in New York for 5 years. Obviously, very different.
Yeah, very.
Right. When I first came here, people said, you can get anywhere in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I said, sure. And it is true.
Yeah.
It is true. You can get anywhere in 10 to 15 minutes. It's fantastic. I can get to the airport. I'm not exaggerating when I say literally from my place to the gate at the airport, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm at the gate.
A lot of times security is just such a breeze too.
No, when I first moved, I would go to the airport like 2 hours early, and I'd be sitting. I'm like, what am I going to do for an hour and a half?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I had to learn how to adjust my schedule for the airport.
And then it becomes nice because then you don't have to get to the airport, 60 minutes before or whatever.
Yeah, you come out and if you've got checked luggage, it's relatively quickly. And it's wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, Vafa, thank you so much for the time.
Oh, pleasure.
It's been a great conversation. We always end it in two ways. I'll let you cover the nonprofit side, and then I'll cover the last question we ask is from the Virginia Council of CEOs, the organization here in Richmond.
Yes.
And they ask, as a CEO, it can be lonely at the top. How do you deal with that?
It's your choice to make it lonely or not.
Expand,
right?
That's
interesting. I've got a great leadership team. The folks, that have been with the organization, folks that are new, different roles and responsibilities. So you don't have to be lonely. Right? If you are lonely as a chief executive officer, it's probably because consciously or unconsciously you've put yourself in that situation, right?
Yeah.
I've got a great board, great board members. I'm on my third chairman, just because the terms of the chairs are rotating. Great chairs, all different. So I don't feel alone. I miss my mother, who's in Toronto.
Yeah.
But no, I don't feel lonely. There's a great community within the organization, outside the community, outside the organization. I've got ex-board members that we're in contact on an ongoing basis.
Oh, that's awesome.
We've got partners at VCU.
Yeah.
That we're in contact with. So why are you lonely? I mean, if you got a major issue that you're dealing with, why aren't you engaging with your board and with your senior leadership team? Why are you in the corner being lonely trying to figure it out?
Yeah.
Great point. Have good self-awareness and don't isolate.
I'm sure there's situations where not every company has a board, for example, but I do believe surrounding yourself with the right people. Maybe it's the leadership team, or maybe it's the board, or maybe it's trusted advisor.
For sure.
However it might be structured.
You've got a mentor. You've got a couple of trusted advisors. I mean, there's no reason why, even if you're an entrepreneur and you have your own company, there's no reason why you can't talk to 3 to 5 people and say, can I use you guys as my quasi board, as my advisory board? Can we get together once a quarter and I come to you and we talk about the issues that I'm dealing with and trying to figure things out?
Yeah.
So
it's funny. A year and a half ago, I established an advisory board for my company. It's been really helpful.
Good for you.
Just a sounding board.
Absolutely.
Hey, we might go this way or this direction or this direction or this direction. What do you guys think about these? Or it's been cool to have a sounding board.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're lonely, it's your choice.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing we do on our show for the Richmond Leadership Lab is for our guests, we kind of always ask them what's a nonprofit that they support that they want to give a shout out to, because we make a small donation to that nonprofit. So I think it's safe to say that we would love to make our donation to World Pediatric, unless you say otherwise, Vafa.
The other one is the Vafa Akhavan Hawaii Fund. Make a contribution there. No, of course. I mean, World Pediatrics. We have a 4x gift in kind. So for every dollar that we receive, we actually generate $4 additional of gift in kind. Yeah. So a $100 contribution becomes $500. Right. And $500 can get you 2 hernia operations for children in Haiti.
Wow.
So
it's amazing.
Yeah.
If people want to get involved with World Pediatric, or if they want to give, how can they do that?
You can go to our website, worldpediatrics.org. There is a portal for donations. Of course, we welcome all donations. The more funds we have, the more we do. The less funds we have, the less we do. Yeah. You don't need to be an Ivy League MBA to figure that one out. And if you want to participate as a volunteer, there is a contact us page with email. Just send us an email. We'll be responsive that, hey, I have time. I can volunteer. We need volunteers with our events. We need, every time we send a team, we have to pack a lot of supplies. So volunteering, being available to help and learn about medical supplies and packaging them, etc. So volunteerism and contributions on our website.
That's great.
Always.
That's awesome.
Perfect.
Vafa, thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
I'm definitely going to be re-listening to this one a lot. I feel like I got a lot I took away from today. So thank you for joining us.
I hope it was helpful for your audience, and
I'm sure it was.
Try to make it as real as possible as compared to kind of textbook.
Agreed.
Stuff.
I think that's how people learn anyway.
Yeah.
I do want to share.
Please, if there's anything else you want to shout out, please do.
One thing. I would encourage all of your. I would encourage your listeners to read a book, Canoeing. It's called Canoeing the Mountains. I'm going through that right now.
Okay. Yeah, tell us.
It's written by Todd Bolsinger.
Okay.
It's about leadership in unexpected terrain. And goes back to situational leadership. Right? And I'm finding it to be I'm about halfway through it. I'm finding it to be the most pertinent content to what I'm experiencing in my world.
Interesting.
And I would encourage your audience, anybody who's listening, to pick up the book and read it.
That's great. We'll drop that in the show notes and the description and things like that, so people can check that out. I love that recommendation. Yeah. Anything else, Vafa, you want to make sure we mention or shout out or anything like that?
No, I'm just to your audience, stay on track, learn, reflect.
Love that.
Do it better next time.
Every day.
Yep.
Every day.
For sure.
Vafa, thank you.
So much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. It was fun.